Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. This is the podcast where we take a look at the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, and our general joy of being alive. And of course, we always like to talk about sustainable design as well. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and I've got a really interesting one this week. I've got Ann Sussman and Kelsey Bradley from The Happy, HAPI.org, and we're going to talk about what that means in a minute. And they're doing some really interesting stuff. It almost reminds me of the early days of website design. And that's just the little teaser. So let's start by having Ann and Kelsey tell us a little bit about themselves. Ann, let's start with you. You're the president of thehappy.org. Tell us about your background, what led you into the world of architecture, and what led you towards The Happy.
Well, so I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks, Joe, for leading this way. My name's Ann Sussman. I'm a licensed architect, and I'm the president of the Human Architecture and Planning Institute, thehappy.org. And what The Happy is about is taking new ideas and new insights from psychology and biology, 21st century ones, and bringing them to architecture and planning. So one of the things that's quite interesting in architecture, you don't have to mandatorily study psychology or biology, even though you're designing primate habitat. So The Happy exists to try to bridge disciplines. And it's really exciting to do this because I'm based in Boston, in Greater Boston. Boston's a biotech hub. And for 10 years now, we've been playing with eye tracking software, the kind of software the tech industry and the business world uses to really understand the human experience and to understand things like human instinct, which turns out to be really important in understanding the architectural experience. So I'll talk more about that, how these tools are incredible. And if architects use them, they'll build more successfully and more sustainably. Kelsey.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Bradley. I'm the executive director of The Happy. My background is also in architecture, although I had a lot of frustration in architecture school and chose to move into the nonprofit space as opposed to taking the licensure route. And so for the last 9 years, I've been working in my own nonprofit, building sustainable educational buildings for underserved communities in Africa. And in the last few years, I've taken a big interest in how our built world impacts us, like Ann said, both biologically and psychologically. And that has really brought me on this path. Now I'm on track to be entering a graduate student in urban design this fall. And it's been a great joy for me to be a part of The Happy and really spreading this message, which I feel is really important.
Yeah, it is really important. It's wonderful. And my God, what a beautiful alignment with the primary purpose for this show. And I got to say, definitely the coolest sort of organizational name that I've heard in a long time. So hats off to you for that. Let's dive right in. Let's talk about The Happy. Again, it stands for Human Architecture and Planning Institute, HAPI.org, for anyone who wants to check it out. Okay, goals of the organization. We talked about those briefly, but let's go a little deeper on that. What are the larger goals and how do you plan on achieving those goals with the organization?
Well, so legally, we are a tax-exempt charitable organization, and our mission is education and research, really educate people about how the human experience of architecture happens, just like what your podcast is about, and do research about it with the new tools that most architects are unaware of. We now have the tools to predict how people will respond to a building before it's even built. You can, and there's AI software now that's very powerful. It's already out there that can tell, for instance, how quickly will someone find the front door of the hospital you just built? How quickly will they find the sign for the restroom? I mean, you can determine that now before something's built. There's AI software called 3M Visual Attention Software, which is a plugin for Photoshop. Most architects don't know it's even there. And because just the idea of understanding the human experience, understanding where we see the world like an animal is a new thing. And that's what's fascinating to me too. And I've been kind of fiddling with this domain now for like 10 years, although The Happy legally is only 5 years old. What's amazing to me is how the business world is so astute about people, because they know if you don't understand humans, you're not going to do a good business. So there's a great story I tell about how I heard an interview with the lead designer for the Lincoln car, who was told because of COVID to come up with a new idea for the Lincoln. And his answer was, when you get into the new Lincoln, you will feel like you're hugged by your mother.
That's a big statement.
And
That's a bold statement for sure. I like that.
my mom, hello? Well, we now know we're an emotional animal that thinks, and the quality of our emotional, physical experience will determine our thinking and our actions and behavior. So you'll get into that new Lincoln, you'll feel so cozy. You weren't even looking for a car. Oh my God, this is worth $70,000, whatever. He really gets it. And so that idea of really privileging the human experience and then basing your design, even of a car, around, that's a complete, new way of thinking about that architects aren't aware of, but the business world is. And that's the other thing. When you do Google this a little bit, you learn that biometrics, the tools like eye tracking, facial expression analysis, heart rate analysis, sweat gland analysis, the major purchasers are the automotive industry.
Right.
Organization is really focused on bringing this knowledge and conceptual thinking, not even just as a concept, but also as fundamental tools to the architecture and design world, planning world as well. And so we're focused on bringing more research studies, more educational opportunities, being able to partner with different firms and architects to help show them how to use this to their benefit and ultimately to their clients' benefit.
So, Kelsey, is there some kind of combination of eye movement, heart rate, body temperature, etc., that can tell people this person is experiencing joy, or this person is experiencing, curiosity, or this person is not digging this? Is that how it works, or is that just too much of an oversimplification?
It is very complicated because our brains are so complicated and our bodies are complicated.
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you here, but basically you can combine eye tracking with facial expression analysis.
Yeah.
There's now a really easy software you can use from your laptop, which shows you can run a quick study, downloading a link, and you can predict where people will smile. After running the study, you can predict where people will smile, where they'll frown, where they'll look unhappy looking at something. You can predict all this. And so the big companies, like the big wealthy business schools and the big companies, like the car companies, they will integrate all the sensors because they really privilege and prioritize human experience. Yeah, but I would argue that visual sensing is really important because our brain is as big as it is. 30% of the volume of the brain is involved in vision, highly visual species. So
Right.
Vision tells you a lot. It doesn't tell you how people feel, but it tells you where they're looking. And that turns out to be really important when you're designing an ad or a website or a sign. Are people going to see it? How do you know? We now have the tools to predict how quickly someone will see and what they'll look at on your website. And so,
all right, forgive me. I'm going to stay on this track for a little while because this is really interesting. So how would you actually alter a design, for example? Give me an example, make one up, or think of something that actually happened and tell me how you would change a design based on people's reaction to the model.
And that evolutionarily, before you're even born, it's preset how you're going to respond to stimuli. The brain is hardwired,
Right.
evolved to look at red first. So in Greater Boston, what I see is sometimes realtors will paint a door of a building that's going on sale or a house. They'll paint the door red.
Right.
Because unconsciously, more people will look at it because red grabs our eyes first.
Right.
If the door's yellow or blue or brown, they're not going to look at it as much.
Right. Burger King, McDonald's, Wendy's, they're all red.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I believe you said that. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Macy's Star.
Right.
Trader Joe's, red.
Yeah.
It all has to be red. If Trader Joe's had a blue logo, it wouldn't be looked at as much. And so I once read a Harvard Business Review article called Attention is Currency.
Right.
Attention is currency. It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The tech world has been living and dying by that adage for, a couple of decades now. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, okay, we talked about color. Let's say, for example, a group of people who are being tested, they get to look at a model of a building and their eyes all go to a particular area in the building, which was unintended, for example. What do you do with that information? Is that just left to the architect to decide if, hey, that just works out that way? It's really cool that they happen to look at that side of the building. Or is it, oh, I really wanted them to start here, or I wanted them to go there first? How is it used?
Well, it's new, and
Yeah. Okay.
it's new. The AI software, 3M visual attention software, which predicts where people look at everything in the first glance, whatever they're looking at. Basically, it's, it's what we look at first glance ends up determining where we'll go. And so you can use it in lots of different ways, whether painting the door red, or you can use it to see the thing that we're really hardwired not to look at is blankness.
Is what? Sorry?
Blankness.
Blankness. Okay.
So you can see that even behind me here. This is something on Boston City Hall. They put a face of the person who had Boston City Hall design, the mayor who had it built. And when you eye track it, non-consciously, people look right at the face. They avoid the blankness of the brain.
They don't look anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So we avoid monotony, basically.
And blankness.
Okay. Monotony.
I think what's important is that this information, you have to kind of align it with your design goals.
Right.
That's really the key for architects and different designers. If your goal is to make this a school that's really easy for children to navigate, knowing these things is really important, and you're able to line it up with the biometrics and make better informed evidence-based decisions instead of feeling like cognitive thinking decisions may not align with how the brain actually works.
Do you want to bring lots of healthy, beautiful, natural light in your building and still meet energy codes? Try Solera from Advanced Glazings. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Right. Okay. Well, so who's going to use this? How are they going to use it? How are they going to gain access to this information with their, say with their Revit models or whatever? How do they learn from the research that you guys are doing?
Well, I think what's interesting is, as we might have mentioned before, since COVID, people are more interested in talking about health, well-being, limiting stress. And so now we can actually start looking at your choices, how different experiences change how people feel. There's here in this one up here, this blank concrete wall is what people see when they go into Somerville from the T and from the transit. If it were covered with, Matisse-like art, people would have a much different experience. They'd say, oh my God, this is a fun place. I'm arriving. Whereas right now, just blankness, they don't know where to look.
Yeah.
And you can really track that. Because right now, the architecture licensing exam, when I took it, over 20 years ago now, they never even mention emotions. They don't even mention happiness. You go to business school at Harvard or other business schools now. Harvard published a series on emotional intelligence for business school students.
Yeah.
And they have booklets on happiness. They have booklets on resilience. I mean, these are words that were never used. So that's the big pivot. Basically, in a way, your podcast is part of the pivot.
And if you're looking at it from kind of a work process standpoint, this technology can be used at any point. So schematic drawings, you can eye track schematic drawings, you can eye track a full built out Revit model, renderings, all of that. Obviously there's a financial component. I don't know if you want to be eye tracking your final renderings and then find out that there's a problem when you could have done it in schematics.
Yeah.
It can be used at any point.
So the real driver here is education then, right? This is all about education. Okay. All right. That's brilliant.
But also the driver is well-being. We need to design for well-being.
Sure.
For human experience. Right now, as you may know, Americans are 49th in longevity. We have the lowest longevity of any developed country. It's expected by 2050 to fall further to 66th. And this is World Health Organization data. And part of the problem is there's rising obesity, increased loneliness. People can't easily walk. And we're designing places where people don't want to be.
Right.
They have to jump in the car, which is the last thing they should be doing. They should be walking, meeting up with other people, having conversations. So we need to not design modern suburbia. We need to design more communities where people aren't car dependent, where people can walk and communicate and lead their lives going from place to place very easily. That's what we really do.
So I know you guys have done some work in the past. I'm going off script again. Forgive me. I do this all the time with ADHD or something. But I know you guys have done some work where you've gone through some towns and you've applied the eye tracker technology to some downtown areas. What are some of the most fascinating things that were unveiled?
A little video. We did a pilot study using mobile eye tracking and galvanic skin response walking down Newbury Street and Boylston Street.
Okay.
Boylston Street's a wider street with more cars, more high-rise skyscrapers. Boylston Street's got the brownstones, narrower one way. And it was
Newbury Street.
Newbury Street, has Boylston has the high rises. And what we learned really quickly is that what shocked us, and we can send you a quick 2-minute video about it, is that the brain makes people without their awareness focus on cars. So having streets with less cars allows people to focus more on other things. I don't know if you know this, in France last month, they announced that they are taking cars off 500 streets in Paris.
Right.
And Newbury Street is car-free, I think 8 months a year, every Sunday. And it's just amazing. No cars parked. People walk down this. It just invites you in. The street becomes a community generating space. Whereas now with the cars, your brain and body just go into alert.
Yeah, they did that in London some time ago as well. There's a large section of London where there's just car free now. I've never really looked at the results of that, but I know that nobody's fighting it anymore. So it tells me that it was a good experiment.
Rising obesity and lower longevity is we don't have places to be together and be human.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons. So the 42% rise, I think, is the highest obese level ever recorded in the United States. Again, people can't move enough.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the cars very briefly. What attracts us to the cars? Is it just the motion, the fact that they're moving? I know when you look at things that grab our attention, one of the things is motion. So is that what it is about the cars?
There's a couple things about cars. One's movement. They also have the front face of a car looks like a face, and we're pre-programmed to look at faces.
Right.
But there are other components as well. Cars are extremely noisy, and we are unconsciously very triggered by noises, and loudness are one of the only things that universally scares humans. So there's a kind of a couple of components, but it's really it's the movement. In the savannah, if something is running at us, we're going to react. So
and that's a really good point she made. The brain and body you have is this exactly the same as a primate, a Homo sapien on the savannah 40,000 years ago.
Right.
And the car companies know that. I mean, I found a Wall Street Journal article from 2007, why cars got angry. So they really study the facades as well as the back end of the car to attract people non-consciously. Cars got angrier as people were more worried about the economy.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Look, they're the major purchasers of the biometric tools. They're designing so you feel hugged like your mom, or you have a scary looking car, so you'll feel more powerful in an uncertain world, So yeah, we have a new book coming out, The Handbook of Neuroscience in the Built Environment. That'll come out in August 2025. And there's a chapter about how we see cars as animals. So our brain non-consciously, even a parked car, and in the video I can send you, that's what shocked us, is even a parked car, your brain makes you look at it really quickly to make sure it's not moving, just to your brain. And so I thought people would be looking at the buildings. No, if the cars were parked in front, they looked at the cars first.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's take away the cars for a minute. Let's just make them go away. They're gone. Poof. Let's talk about the buildings. What do we want to look at when we're walking through a neighborhood?
I'll start with this, and then Anne has a lot more details, so I'll let her run with it.
Sure.
But we really love visual complexity. Our brain loves visual complexity. So we are looking for complexity within the facade. That may mean different types of materiality, different forms. Our brain loves fractals and biophilic forms, and also greenery itself we're very attracted to, and our brain likes. So those types of things we respond well to, and has a lot more things. So I'll let her.
I'm going to pause her for just a second because you're not getting away with saying fractals without explaining that to some folks in the audience. I think most architects would know what you're talking about, but let's just to be sure.
Yeah, so fractal patterns it's very common in the natural world. So if you think of a fern, kind of every element of the fern kind of opens out into a fractal pattern. They're highly repetitive, but in a specific way. And there is, I think it's 1/f spatial differential frequency. There's a more scientific term they use to describe the fractal pattern, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's a little bit lengthy.
That's okay.
You though, Joe, if you want.
Yeah, that's okay. No, it's cool. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't leave somebody hanging with a definition that we didn't explore ever so slightly. Anne, let's go to you too.
We're also really hardwired, but before we're born, we're hardwired to focus on face-like things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also pareidolia, how our brain sees faces like in two pebbles on the road with below them. We'll see it as a face because
Yeah.
we're wired to look for faces. And so I've done this study, since 2017, where I ask people before my talks to draw a house for a 5-year-old. And what they end up doing usually is a building that looks like a face. They'll do a simple rectangle with 2 windows that suggest eyes and a door that's centered below looking like a mouth. And that's because non-consciously the figural primitive for the face is imprinted in your brain by the 3rd trimester in utero. And so, yeah, that's pretty interesting. So we want to see faces everywhere.
Right.
So
Right.
why did I buy this spoon? Because it had a face.
Right.
And so they know that. And the business world really knows that. Most business logos are faces. Kentucky Fried Chicken, Amazon logo is a smile. It's not random. There are special elements, special parts of the brain are hardwired. More of the brain, this is a neuroscientific fact, more of the brain is wired to read faces, to process faces than any other visual element. We're face-architects before we're architects.
So if you, for example, wanted to have a certain flow of traffic through a building, let's say it's a museum, would it make sense for the next door, say there's 3 doors, but you want them to go through door A, do you make that door and the surrounding of that door a little more face-like to be the place that people...
So they'll look first, non-consciously.
What's that? Say that again?
But you put a logo of a face on it, that's where they'll look non-consciously.
Right.
Even in studies, 3M did this study where they put faces next to to-buy buttons on business websites. The business revenue increased by 60% when there was a face next to the to-buy button.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Why?
Well, so yeah, that's why the business world, they've monetized the science. Whereas the architecture world and the planning world, the design world, the people designing hospitals completely they don't know it.
Well, when this episode comes out, the whole world is going to change. It's a given.
Modernism is very mechanical, but the client is not mechanical. The client's animal.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's talk about how we build this into everybody's job every day. What's, the education part of it? How are you getting in front of more and more people in order to help them understand these tools that we have available?
Well, we have a couple of things at the organization that we are hoping to promote. So Anne has authored a number of books, and with a new one coming out very shortly, we'll be at a booth at the AIA conference in Boston this year. And we also have a online course that is focused on learning these basic tools and understanding these basic concepts, how to use it in an architectural or just design basis, and we've made it by comparatively quite inexpensive. We really want to encourage people to get access to information. And we're also trying to talk a bit more openly about it, and does quite a bit of speaking and just spreading the word about what we think is really important information.
So if you go to the Human Architecture and Planning Institute, just to follow up on what Kelsey said here, you can see our courses or go to our website, geneticsofdesign.com. We have our courses there, and 2 of them are free. 5 of them are $25 each. And it's just about understanding the human subliminal experience, which is foundational for design. So it's important that we understand it as much as the business world and the car companies. They don't question it. They just run with it at a speed that is just amazing.
Yeah. If it works, do more of it. That's, the basics in the business world for sure. Okay, let's do another little side trip. I'm going to do a couple more quick side trips. The first one is the course you teach, Anne. You teach a course called, and I love the title, Buildings, Biology, and the Brain. I would definitely take that course. We've talked a lot about that already, but can you tell us briefly what you cover in the course and what sort of experience and knowledge that you expect your students to leave the course with?
Well, so the Buildings, Biology, and the Brain is it's based on the book Cognitive Architecture, 2nd edition, which is the first book we believe in history to have 50 images of colored eye-tracked architecture. And it just teaches basic concepts about how the brain is hardwired without your awareness to look for edges. The brain is hardwired. That's called thigmotaxis. We're a thigmotactic species. So are most mammals. They tend to go for an edge without even realizing it. Why? Because that protects you. We're thigmotactic. A second theme is how we're hardwired to respond to shapes. Curving shapes attract us in. More sharp shapes we'll tend to run from. A third theme is also, and part of shapes, is the face pattern. The face pattern is more of our brain is devoted to processing faces than anything else. So the business world knows that and monetizes it, And yeah, so people should too. And what's really interesting, we've done studies where we take a house that suggests its windows look like eyes, the way it's arranged, and then we Photoshop out the eyes and we present both in an eye tracking. Without conscious awareness, people will automatically look at the house that has the windows looking like eyes. It's just amazing, the face bias. Another thing is how humans are hardwired. You'll love this, for narrative. Our brain is hardwired to tell stories. Stories get us together. And now they also know that as you age, if you get dementia or Alzheimer's, your ability to understand and tell stories will diminish. And what you also lose is, are you ready for this, Joe? Identity. Being able to have the identity as Joe, as Kelsey. What happens? You lose identity if you lose that narrative capacity. They've actually linked where the narrative circuitry is in the brain and how that connects to being able to form identity.
That makes me really sad.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
We're a storytelling species.
Yeah.
But that's because, again, it's preset in the brain, the need for stories. That's why children's books are such a big, it's such a big market. Well, why? Because kids need stories. It's what they need. And then the fifth thing is nature. We're hardwired to look for nature and at nature. And we love looking at nature. They've done studies. The preferred colors are green and blue worldwide, with a slight preference for blue. And they think that's because humans, we evolved from fish and we evolved to need water.
Yeah. So I remember hearing a long time ago that sex drive is number one and the desire to live close to water is number two in sort of like basic drives.
Well, they do know that. And if you study real estate, you learn that houses with a water view have a 30 to 40% higher valuation.
Yeah.
Because even if we don't use the water now to go fishing, we just still love the view of it. Well, we're from water. Life originated in the water. So
interesting personal story, or maybe not interesting. I don't know, but I'm doing it anyway. My wife and I recently bought a house on a river in a sort of a deep valley, not too far from where I am right now, but it's very rural. I'm pushing 60. I've had a bunch of houses over my lifetime, and I've liked some more than others, but I've never really loved a house. This house, it's a 140-year-old farmhouse on the river in this deep valley. And, the days are a little shorter because of the deep valley. But my God, as I'm driving to this place, like everything just goes, psh. I can just feel the tension go away and I can feel my joy level come up. It's an experience I've never had before, having a house that actually has that kind of magic. The inside is really cool too. And it's an old Acadian French house that is all decorated in pressed tin on the interior, which is something I'd never even seen before. That's cool. But the thing is, as I'm coming down the driveway and there's a mountain and a river facing me, all the crap of the week just goes away. It just vanishes. Yeah. And it really is an incredible feeling. Is my experience typical?
Yeah, I think so. It's part of the face bias too. Humans, the problem with being a social species is the downside is we're not meant to be alone. We're meant to be with others who mirror us. And in our art, we make things that mirror us. So it's not random that 10 million people or whatever go to see the Mona Lisa every year in the museum in Paris. Why?
Right.
They want to look at her and they want to see her looking at them. We're hardwired. In fact, I've also even looked at this, that paintings that show people sell at auction for higher valuation, generally. It's preset what we need to see as a social species. And the more you're mirrored, your well-being, it regulates. You'll feel better.
The other thing, your house has a number of sensory things that have shown to lower blood pressure, bring a sense of calm. It also seems like you're getting a little bit of a sense of awe, this beautiful river, the valley. The mountain. And awe has also been proven to be good for our health as well. So it's probably a combination of the sensorial elements as well as the more kind of hardwired biological elements that Anna's talking about.
I love that. Yeah, I love the sense of awe.
Just wrap up on saying that what's so interesting to me is, people who really care about people or are really selling to them get this in a way that is kind of astonishing. So Walt Disney, he realized in the 1950s, his daughters couldn't play on the streets of LA because of cars when he grew up playing on the streets, What's going on? And so Walt Disney comes up with this idea for Disneyland, and there'll be a Disneyland Main Street with basically no cars on it. There'll be a tram, but no cars. Okay. So he's recreating what he knew growing up in like 1900, right? or his daughters, right, in LA. And then what does he do? He says, well, what should the street look like? So he sent his Imagineers, that's a word he invented, Europe, to chronicle, get this, where people were happiest. And they would come back to Disneyland and draw a version of a street where people were happiest in Europe, in the United States. So what did they do? They did a version of, I think it was a street in Northern Europe, and it has 52 different face-like ornate building facades. Even the fire station looks like a face. A 52 ornate along like a, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile of a street. And Disney built that in 1955 or 6. By 1965 in California, it was the most visited site, tourist site in the United States. He built a similar version, somewhat different architecture, but face-like facades. They were built by Disney Corporation in the 1990s in Paris, Disneyland Paris.
Yeah.
By 2015, it was the most visited site in Europe. Because Disney is putting, Disneyland Corporation, they put happiness first, which does not come first. And they figured out before they knew the science, just by looking, where people were happiest. A street without cars, relatively narrow, face-like facades, each one different and ornate.
Short lifespan, single-use plastic glazing is not a sustainable solution for daylighting. Solera is the glass-based alternative for the new millennium. Learn more at advancedglazings.com.
Right. I love it. All right. There was one more topic that I absolutely want to cover. We're getting a little long, but I want to hear about this. You are presenting soon at the BUA conference in Oslo. It's only a couple of weeks away. Tell me what that conference is about and what you're hoping to achieve by being there.
Well, we were invited to that conference. Some Oslo residents are very interested in kind of building a better Oslo, and they're worried that the modern buildings they're getting is taking away the identity of their traditional city. And so we did an eye tracking study for them, and we're going to be actually doing the results, figuring out the results today. And that's what we'll be presenting, and using eye tracking and facial expression software. That's the software that iMotions developed for education that can run on any computer, any PC. It's called iMotions Online, and we're going to be doing a study there. Because what architects don't realize and planners don't realize and people running governments is we now have the science to show, to predict how people will feel. And the business world already owns this tech. It's time that it transfers over to the architecture and planning world. And health and well-being, as well as commercial success, as Disney saw, depend on it. How people feel. You don't want to build against human instinct. And in a way, that's how we're building a world where people feel like foreigners.
Okay, well, let me ask you a slightly controversial question. So the BUA is, I think it stands for beauty. Specifically, it's about beauty in architecture. Do you get any sort of pushback that says, you can't tie science and biology to beauty stands on its own? Does that argument come up, and how do you speak to it?
Well, people do have preferences, but a lot of the things that humans find beautiful is hardwired in our brain already. So that's why we talk about things like ornateness, different color, certain colors. These things pretty universally appeal to us. There are some preferences, and a lot of the work that Anne has done is seeing that some preferences may be due to differences in people's brains. So perhaps they're a little bit more neurodivergent, or they have a PTSD or other things that would actually change their brain chemistry and alter how they look at things, how they perceive things, and what they feel is beautiful. So we see variations, we see preferences, but a lot of things are hardwired in us.
Yeah, otherwise Disneyland Main Street wouldn't work. And I think there's now Disneylands on 3 continents. I think there are 5 of them or something. They're on 3 continents. It's always the same. And I think the reason I got into this, when I was like 14, my parents took me to India and I saw the Taj Mahal in Agra. And it's like, wait a minute, why am I so attracted to this? I don't know this religion. I don't speak Hindi. Something doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense. The way it was organized, the beautiful garden in front of it, the bilaterally symmetrical building that's face-like, the fractal patterns of the marble on it. It's wired in me. And we weren't talking about it in the 20th century. We only talked like we were machine thinkers, and we're not. We're animals. And it's preset what animals need to see for their survival.
I love it. All right. We've reached the point in the show where I ask my $1 million question. I ask every single guest, and I ask them to answer it from their own perspective. And I'm going to get you guys to answer separately. Okay. Let's let Kelsey go first this time. So, Kelsey, what makes a great building?
I think a great building is one that is designed with intention, that there is a goal for the building and they use evidence-based design and research to actually accomplish that goal, whatever that goal is. Obviously, I also want the things to be healthy and make people feel the way that they're intended to feel.
Love it. Anne, your turn.
Yeah. So I think a great building encourages walkability. Makes it easy to walk to. You don't have to worry about parking. You can walk there. And I think part of the problems in architecture school, they study buildings as they're just like they're one statue all on their own. That's not true. It's part of, you need to be going to school. You need to be going to the doctor's office. You need to be going to pick up flowers. It's all about movement. And so your buildings should encourage movement in the town. So buildings in Venice, buildings in Old Paris, they do that. And buildings in old parts of Manhattan do too. And so you need to encourage walkability because that's what life's about. It's about movement.
Love it. Okay. All right. So a couple of announcements. So you guys will be at the BUA conference in Oslo, May 2nd to 4th. You'll be at the AIA conference in Boston, which is June 5th and 6th, which is my birthday. Feel free to, wish me happy birthday. Largest architectural conference in the U.S. And so is there anything else that you guys would like to announce before we wrap?
The AIA Expo booth is only open on the 5th and the 6th.
Okay.
The free Expo code you can send everybody. It's AIAEXGST.
I think you missed something. AIA 25EXGST?
AIA 25GXT, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll send that to you to make sure I got the right one.
Perfect.
And we have a book coming out called the Handbook of Neuroscience in the Built Environment. That will be out in August, apparently in ebook and hardcover form. That comes out in August. The Handbook of Neuroscience and the Built Environment. It's part of the Routledge International Handbook Series. And we had 51 authors do 32 chapters in the book. And it's online already on Routledge International Handbook Series. And I think that just shows that interest in this, just like interest in your podcast, is exploding. Just understanding the human experience. The authors for this book come from 4 continents. It's exploding everywhere.
Send me the links to those 2 books when you have a moment, and I'll share them with our network.
And also, I'll send you the link for the AIA conference because they're expecting 15,000 people there will be in the center. So it should be great.
Very cool. Kelsey, Anne, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful experience.
Thank you, Joe, for your leadership.
All right. You guys take care.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.